We'll go for Mr. Singleton here. In your testimony, you talked that the goals of things like the Communist Party would be to invest in American universities to A, stifle free speech, which is something we've kind of seen in this administration, and otherwise monitor activities or propagate disinformation and false narratives. Could you please elaborate on that and tell us what type of disinformation and false narratives people might want to propagate?
Sure. The Chinese Communist Party is waging what it calls a discourse war against the United States.
Could you speak up?
Sure. The Chinese Communist Party is waging its discourse power against the United States and other allied democracies around the world. It seeks to set...
We're not a democracy, but go ahead.
Yeah, to seek and to set and shape global narratives about China's rise in ways by comparing, contrasting, and consistently misrepresenting the benefits of authoritarianism and the deficiencies, so-called, of democracy. And so on U.S. college campuses, one of the things that they do is sow social division on college campuses. The Chinese Students and Scholars Associations that we've mentioned are specifically funded to protest, disrupt free speech protections, academic integrity, all with the goal of presenting a particular political narrative around China's so-called peaceful rise.
Maybe I didn't hear you. I want you to specifically tell us what type of narratives, and by the way, when the Soviet Union was still around, there was a KGB agent who left, and he felt that most of the money being spent by the KGB in the United States was not doing spying. It was, in essence, to spread disinformation in America to cause America to collapse from within. Couldn't you give us examples, specific examples of false narratives that representatives of the CCP might try to promote in American universities?
Sure, absolutely. The first and foremost is that the United States is in decline, that the Chinese Communist Party does not represent a risk to U.S. national security or to the world order. They also propagate malign narratives about Chinese human rights abuses, seeking to neutralize the legitimate claims made about genocide and Chinese Communist Party directed genocide activities against the Uyghurs. This is all designed in many respects, like I said, to sow social division here, but to help propagate false Chinese Communist Party narratives across the United States and to undermine our will.
Could you give me those false narratives about the United States? What do they want our students to think about the U.S.?
Sure, they tend to want us to believe that the U.S. is a declining power and that we should embrace the narratives and the lack of universal values that the Chinese Communist Party propagates in the development of a new international order that reflects China's values and interests, that rejects human rights, that rejects universal values, and that seeks to, in many ways, divide the United States population against each other.
How would you divide the U.S.?
Well,
how are we trying to divide the U.S. population?
Well, the Chinese call it cognitive domain warfare, and it's not, the United States is certainly not the only target of the Chinese Communist Party's activities. We see them quite actively in places like Taiwan, where they're seeking to divide the population against itself, but also convince...
Give me an example of how they're trying to divide Americans against themselves.
Sure. I mean, simply propagating narratives that the U.S. government is anti-Asian or seeking to perhaps put, I think it's sort of been referenced here, Chinese Americans.
You mean they're trying to say the Americans are anti-Asian?
They say the U.S. government is going against Chinese citizens, Chinese diaspora communities. In fact, the new Chinese ambassador here to Washington, D.C., the first message that he sent out upon arriving in Washington, D.C. was a communique to all Chinese students across the United States saying the party is here to protect you.
I mean, to me, people who've come here to Asia, and this is wonderful, I have wonderful Asian friends, they're doing better than any other ethnic group in America. People from India, people from China, people from Philippines. Who in the world what possible narrative would they spread that would tell Asian students that America's anti-Asian? It seems just almost beyond belief you'd even find something like that.
There are no doubt many instances in which there has been, quantifiable rise in anti-Asian rhetoric or attacks on, totally unacceptable attacks on Chinese students. And what the Chinese state media and Chinese state actors do is they amplify those messages in that dialogue in their discourse, seeking to portray the United States as a racist country.
Okay, any specific groups that you can think of that they may be funding or be behind that might spread this divisive narrative?
The Chinese Students and Scholars Association is by far one of the most important.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to recognize Ms. Wilson for her